Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, what are you waiting for? Sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. I'm passing along all the tidbits I'm learning at BYU football practices and sending them to you in the form of a text message. It does not get much more direct and intimate than that. Get a 14-day free trial. Click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching and or listening to this. Sign up today, just $5 a month afterward if you think it's worth your money. Really hope you guys will continue to join us. We had a nice surge in people joining up for the group, and the hope is that we'll continue to add more as the season, speaking of BYU football, draws closer and closer, but we'll also have plenty of BYU basketball coverage as well. And that's where we're going to leave off on today's show. We're going to talk BYU hoops here for just a moment. Yesterday, Kevin Young, the BYU men's basketball program, formally announced their 2024 non-conference slated games. I'll say right at the outset here, the slated games for BYU in the non-conference portion of this season don't thrill me to that big of a degree. There is a major road game going back to Providence as part of the Big East Big 12 Challenge. That's a big game for BYU to go to Rhode Island and take on the Providence Friars. That is a resume building type game in the non-conference. BYU will also participate in what they call the MTE, the mid-season tournament events or mid-season, whatever they call them. Well, they'll play in the Rady Children's Invitational down in San Diego, California. This year, their field includes Ole Miss, BYU, NC State, and Purdue. Quite honestly, any of those teams are going to be resume builders for one another because the nice part is all those programs have had some recent success. Obviously, Purdue and NC State in particular. BYU's familiar with NC State because, they had that crazy game down in Las Vegas not that long ago at a similar type MTE event. But I think the biggest non-conference games are that MTE event in San Diego at the Rady Children's Invitational that will happen over Thanksgiving weekend, and then also the road game at Providence. That is the only true road game for BYU in their non-conference slate. The other games are either home games or their neutral site. I look at this, and the home slate, quite honestly, is weak. I'm just going to say it flat out. It is weak. Now, is that a bad thing? No, I don't think it's a bad thing. Consider the level that BYU is going to be playing in terms of talent and depth and overall prowess they'll be facing in the Big 12 slate. Getting any and all confidence you can from the non-conference slate is going to be very, very critical, and that's why you see the likes of first-time matchups against Central Arkansas to open the season on November 5th, and then you see Riverside that weekend. Those are it's not first time for UC Riverside, second time all time. Then Queens comes in, the first time BYU's ever faced Queens out of the Carolinas. The final non-conference game is against Florida A&M on December 20th. They've never played the Rattlers, speaking of BYU. You've got 3 first-time matchups against teams that BYU is just flat out better than and should steamroll. You have some intriguing matchups in terms of former games from eras past. You have a home game against Fresno State, obviously, as they come to Provo. You convinced Wyoming that, hey, we don't want to play in Laramie. Let's play at the Delta Center in Salt Lake City. Now, this stipulation with that, according to Rocco Miller, is that BYU agreed to an amended contract that requires them to go to Wyoming the following season in 2025, 2026. I like to see BYU buy their way out of that, but nonetheless, you got Wyoming in the Delta Center, allowing BYU fans to go up on December 14th and go have that annual pre-Christmas game up there in Salt Lake City. But quite frankly, looking at this, the home slated games are going to feature a number of home games for you as a Cougar fan to go out and root on the Cougars and get to know this team, get to know Kevin Young, his style of play. But they're going to be a little bit boring because I honestly look at this and I don't see any reason why BYU outside of the road game at Providence and potentially, depending on how the matchups go in that Rady Children's Invitational, those are really the only 2 threats to me in my mind of BYU losing 1, maybe 2 games in the non-conference slate. There is a realistic possibility that BYU runs the table in the non-conference, is undefeated going into Big 12 play, but then as we all know, yet again, finishing 500 in the Big 12 this year might get you a single-digit seed and find yourself as maybe a 6 or a 7 at the very worst. That's how deep and talented this league is. I'm seeing some early projections for the Big 12 and how it might shake out, and they've got BYU sitting around between 6th and 9th in the league. And consider the talent that Kevin Young has brought into this program. It's unlike any of his predecessors, quite literally. If you look at the caliber of Jaeger Denham, Cannon Catchings and the like, Elijah Crawford, on the list, Brody Kozlowski. But the crazy thing is that the Big 12 added that much depth and talent themselves, and that pushes BYU down the pecking order. Can they improve upon their fifth place finish from a year ago? There's no reason to think they can't do that, but it is absolutely going to be a dog-eat-dog world out there in the Big 12. So while I say that the non-conference slate is weak for BYU, I completely understand why. I do not disagree why they went about scheduling it the way that they did. This is a great opportunity to ease BYU into playing a new style of basketball under a first-time head coach. Kevin Young doesn't want to come out of this shoot and have to face Duke, just use an example, in game one, because that obviously would lend itself to your guys being a little more tight than they need to be, and they can go out there in the case of playing against a program the caliber, and something against Central Arkansas, but you bring Central Arkansas in and you allow BYU to kind of ease their way into figuring out what the rotation is going to be, what the offensive sets need to look like. It is the right schedule for BYU to kick off the era for Kevin Young. Would I have liked to seen some more marquee matchups, and especially when it comes to a home game or two? Yeah, absolutely. Maybe in future seasons we will see that, because my read on Kevin Young is that he is unafraid of playing the proverbial big dogs. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he will absolutely schedule cream puff schedules like this in terms of the non-conference slate. But the home heavy nature of it is a good thing for you as a Cougar fan. It means a lot of fun nights in November and December going out to the Marriott Center. I'll be there myself. And quite honestly, I cannot remember the last time I've been this ecstatic to be covering BYU basketball. Many of you know that I'm more of a football guy than I'm a hoops guy, but I got to say, there's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of excitement. I am just absolutely tickled at the thought of what BYU might be able to accomplish with Kevin Young at the helm of this BYU basketball program. It really feels like the sky is the limit for this team. Can he continue to recruit at an extremely high level? And ultimately, can he prove that he is a capable coach, as capable a coach on the court as he is in terms of the recruiting environment? If he proves capable of that, this is a coach that has got the talent coming into BYU that could elevate the Cougars to quite literally all-time status. I said it once on this podcast, I'll say it again. If Kevin Young leads BYU to a Final Four berth at any point during his run as BYU men's basketball coach, I would elevate him automatically to the greatest BYU basketball coach ever. Nothing against Stan Watts, Steve Cleveland, Frank Arnold, Dave Rose. There's a lot of good coaches in BYU basketball history, but if you can do something that's not been done in BYU basketball history and you recruit at the level that Kevin Young is recruiting at, I don't care that it's early on in his tenure. I would elevate him very quickly to near, if not the top of the heap in BYU coaching circles and history. I really do believe that. So we'll see how it goes, but that's the non-conference slate of games. If you want to go check it out, go to Locked On. You can go to BYUCougars.com. A lot of home games, as I mentioned, on the slate. Only three official neutral site games, and then the one true road game amongst the entire bunch. 3 first-time matchups. And the one other note I meant to mention is that every one of these games outside of the MTE event down there in San Diego, so every other team on the schedule, BYU has either a winning record against, or it will be a first-time matchup for the BYU men's basketball program. So something you can file away for future reference.